What's it like to fire an AR-15? It's horrifying, menacing, and very, very loud. Those are the immortal words of Gersh Kuntzman, who is in fact a reporter for the New York Daily News. Hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your right angle on the scariness of scary weapons and how scary they can be to people who are scared easily. Gentlemen, the article itself is now legendary. Just after the Orlando shooting, Mr. Kuntzman, who's a reporter, decided to go down to a gun shop and fire an AR-15. He recorded his feelings and his experiences extremely honestly and instantly became a laughingstock all across the country and perhaps around the world. So let me first read to you a little bit of the article that got him into the kind of trouble that he's in today. It felt to me like a bazooka and sounded like a cannon. One day after 49 people were killed in the Orlando shooting, I traveled to Philadelphia to better understand the firepower of military-style weapons and, hopefully, explain their appeal to gun lovers. But mostly, I was just terrified. Squeeze lightly on the trigger and the resulting explosion of firepower is humbling and deafening, even with ear protection. The recoil bruised my shoulder, which can happen if you don't know what you're doing. The brass shell casings disoriented me as they flew past my face. The smell of sulfur and destruction made me sick. The explosions, loud, like a bomb, gave me a temporary form of PTSD. For at least an hour after firing the gun, just a few times, I was anxious and irritable. Now, first of all, the PTSD remark got him into a fair amount of trouble, and I think that's really the hinge around what actually made so much action about making fun out of this guy. I would like to say that he did apologize for the PTSD remarks on a follow-up article. Good. And then he went on to call the AR-15 in the follow-up article a weapon of mass destruction. So needless to say, the internet struck first, and the first thing we see, of course, are some of these memes, these pictures with captions. Let's just take a look at them, some of them, shall we? From the man who gets PTSD from firing an AR-15. I rolled my chair over bubble wrap at work today. Now I know what it's like when our troops hit an IED. Plays Angry Birds, knows what it's like to receive incoming artillery fire. Skipped the last step on the stairs, earned my jump wings.
Finger off the trigger. How did that feel?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
It made me spill my drink almost.
Now, Steve, this was designed to terrorize people in New York City about the power of those weapons and the heat, the hayseeds and the rubes and the hicks out in flyover country who seem to find them so strangely appealing. Are you sufficiently terrorized, Steve, that you are now filled with terror and that the terror from New York has reached your terrified home in Colorado?
Oh, I'm so scared that on Thursday I packed my boys, ages 10 and 5, into the car, and my lovely niece who's visiting up from Texas, age 12, and we went up to Cabela's to buy an AR-15.
Hey, is that your first?
Yeah, it was my first,
fun.
and I got the. They had a great sale price on Smith & Wesson's M&P 15 Sport 2. I haven't had a chance to fire it yet, but I'm bulking up my shoulder to make sure I don't get hurt. Listen, this guy, you quoted his article saying he had a temporary form of PTSD. This may be a minor thing. He apologized for saying that, but that's not what he said in the original version of the article that I quoted on Instapundit on Monday or Tuesday, whenever it came out last week. What he said was a temporary case of PTSD. He was claiming the real deal, and he made a stealth edit to his own article, didn't reveal the stealth edit, and then apologized if you somehow got offended from his form of PTSD, when in fact he said he had an actual temporary case of it. Maybe that's a little distinction to you. In my mind, that's kind of a big deal, especially the stealth edit, and then apologizing because people got all riled up at the original version. That's a pretty shameful act for a so-called journalism. In fact, he's a lying sack of journalism. Look, if he were serious, he could show us the bruise on his shoulder. No, we didn't get a picture of that. If he were serious, he would know that a bazooka is a recoilless weapon. So actually, yeah, an AR-15 is an awful lot like a bazooka in that respect because it's a glorified .22 shell. There's not a whole lot of weight. There's not a whole lot of grains in that little tiny bullet that leaves the chamber. So this guy, he got all the details wrong. He lied about what the gun shop owner thinks about the AR-15. He lied about his experience, and then in his so-called correction, retraction, apology, whatever you want to call it, he said, "Well, it's just like my opinion, man." And instead of actually responding to the facts that people taunted him with.
Well, Steve, let me just say, as a person who's owned an AR-15 since 2009, I have to warn you that the tendency to want to customize these things and make one exactly your own will be overwhelming. They call it Barbie for boys, and that's exactly what it is. Well, Scott, sometimes the written word is even more scathing than the visual pictures that we talked about just a moment ago. So let me read to you just a little bit of an article from our friends over at the brilliant satire site called The People's Cube. In this particular article we're going to read about the trauma associated with firing a BB gun. What's it like to fire a Daisy BB gun? It's an experience I'll never forget. I go to the sporting goods section, a perfect charnel house where implements of sulfur, death, and destruction are openly and brazenly sold. I notice a BB gun just lying on a shelf. I reach for it as if it was a poisonous snake, wondering if it will go off when I pull it off the shelf. That's right, a shelf where anybody could get to it. I went to a wooded area to fire the BB gun, a Daisy 509 Buck, probably made by Bushmaster. I bruised my knuckles operating the cocking lever. Taking aim, I closed my eyes, gritted my teeth, and pulled the trigger. The sound of the spring-loaded plunger going bong startled me. I became disoriented watching the BB arc towards its target. The dink sound it made bouncing off a can of Coke was horribly loud. The recoil was horrendous, like a bazooka or some other kind of recoilless weapon, and it dislocated my shoulder. I vomited and cried. I still have PTSD, anxiety, irritability, nightmares. I may never again be the same. Now, Scott.
And there's a question there?
There is, in fact. There is. And it's actually a very important question, believe it or not, because we've been making fun of this. He deserves to be made fun of, but some aspects of this are not very funny. This guy and other people just exactly like him in skyscrapers in New York who go from their high-rise condominiums to their high-rise offices via limousine. People like Mr. Kuntzman are the people that, in fact, do determine what news the American people get, how they get it, what stories are reported, what stories are excluded, what angles on the stories are covered, what the names are, what the spin is, all of it. All of it is pretty much produced by people that are as cowardly and neurotic as this guy, and that actually is not so funny, is it?
Well, yeah, and let me start by saying, first of all, maybe I hope Mr. Kuntzman sees this video because this may be helpful to him. I have not been struck by a round fired from any kind of AR-15. However, I was struck by a round fired from, I believe it was a Daisy BB gun, and it actually hit me in the knuckle of my ring finger on my left hand. And so I want to ask Mr. Kuntzman to kind of lean into his computer screen because it's not a very large scar, but I want him to be able to get a good look at this, which is right there.
Oh, well done. Just for a second, I thought, my God, Scott
you must have spent years rehabbing at Johns Hopkins after that.
It was devastating.
Did you go to the amputee ward at Walter Reed?
Actually, I bent my finger and the BB popped out, which I shouldn't have done because then it started bleeding like crazy.
Oh yeah, like a stuck pig. Sure.
Did you apply for a Purple Heart?
No, I just applied pressure on the wound, and it actually did get infected, and I had to go to the hospital and have a doctor pick the gangrenous flesh away from the hole. But it was ugly. Anyway, this is the worst kind of journalism. Because what this guy did was he knew the story he was going to write before he ever wrote it. He said, I am going to write a story showing people how freaking scary these weapons are. And so then he went and had this alleged personal experience. And if he's even being honest about any of this, one can hardly tell. But if he's even being honest about it, he's clearly a guy who has never fired any sort of gun in his life. Because anybody who thinks that the kick of an AR-15 is ferocious or that it sounds like a bazooka or whatever he said. I mean, this is just absurd. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I got together with about 100 guys from the Baptist church right over here, and we went out to this firing range. And after a little sermonette and some prayer, we all bellied up to the tables where there were all kinds of semi-automatic pistols and a couple of AR-15 style rifles and some 12-gauge shotguns and some skeet shooting and stuff like that. We had a ball for like 3 or 4 hours. And man, this guy would have peed himself through his jeans. I mean, this would have been a terrifying experience. Nobody walked out of there thinking that they were emotionally traumatized in any way. In fact, it was a joyful experience of fellowship among a bunch of men who had a great time, you know, plinking little metal plates and paper targets and stuff like that. We think it's funny because we know what the real thing is like. But you're right, Bill. There are a lot of people who have never fired a weapon and who associate weapons with nothing but shooting people or danger or harm that potentially could come to themselves. And this dishonest journalist has, I'm sure, had a powerful effect on those people.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Scott, speaking of, Bill, if I can jump in here for just a sec. Yeah, I took my kids out shooting Friday with some friends, and you should have seen my 5-year-old begging to get a chance to fire my wife's tiny little Glock 43, and then the hurt in his face, not because he you know, experienced pain and shock from firing the thing, but because his hands were too little to get a grip and be able to fire it.
Yeah.
Kunzman's hands were probably too little to get a grip to be able to fire it too.
Yeah.
Listen, not that I owe anything to reporters from New York City. New York City! But I will say in his follow-up, he did say that he had fired pistols before and that he was in favor of the Second Amendment. I'd like to just give him the same benefit of the doubt and being fair and including all the evidence, which he certainly wouldn't do in one of the articles he wrote. Scott, you said he's the worst kind of reporter, and I think there's some evidence to this, so let me just give you 2 more quotes before we go our merry way. One of them was from the follow-up. He said, "If masculinity is defined by the power to commit violence on a wide scale, I proudly choose femininity." Here's what's ironic about that. Masculinity is, in fact, the ability to produce violence on a wide scale, and that's why men are men, and that's why men have a tendency towards violence. And that's why the only thing that actually stops violence against the innocent is violence inflicted by the strong. The thing that stops violence inflicted by the cruel is the violence inflicted by the kind and the decent and the generous and the forgiving and the sane, who sometimes understand that when you're coming to the table with people who are ready to gun down 50 strangers in a nightclub, you need to apply a little violence to that person because a harshly worded letter probably won't do it. So that's one thing. And the second thing that makes this guy one of the worst writers ever lived is the conclusion that he gives us, which I think is just so brazenly condescending that I just want to read this for you as well. He closes the article by saying, "Even in semi-automatic mode, it's very simple to squeeze off 24 rounds before you even know what has happened. If illegally modified to fully automatic mode, it doesn't take any imagination to see dozens of bodies falling right in front of your barrel. All it takes is the will to do it. 49 people can be gone in 60 seconds. To which I would reply, you know, an airline pilot flying along in a 777, which is a very sophisticated piece of equipment, can nose that airplane over and put it into the ground, and 300 people can be gone in 1/6 of a second. All it takes is the will to do it. You can construct a bomb out of a pressure cooker and put it in on a street in Boston someplace and try to take out as many civilians as you possibly can, and all it takes is the will to do it. As a matter of fact, while you're driving your own car down the road, yes, that deadly implement of murder, which makes loud noises and is also extremely terrifying, you can decide to simply plow into a group of pedestrians on the side of the road and kill 60 people in 6 seconds, and all it takes is the will to do it. And this is the thing that these people will not ever face, is the fact that it is not the gun or the car or an airplane or anything else. It's not the pressure cooker. It's the will to do it. I have found consistently that the one thing that stands out about these people is that they don't trust themselves with the weapon. Sometimes they'll come right out and say it. Why have a gun in the house? What if I got really mad and shot my girlfriend? Tells us a lot about them. Tells us one more thing, too. Tyranny is dependent on cowards. Tyranny requires cowardice in order for it to take form. I don't think there's any question about that. But what's really interesting is cowardice desires tyranny. Nobody talks about that, but it's just as exactly true. It's a relationship between an authoritarian and a person who needs authority and is unwilling to defend himself, his country, his family, or his freedom, no matter what the cost in terms of loud noises and bruised shoulders. For everybody here at the Right Angle team, I'm Bill Whittle with Steve Green and Scott Ott. Once again, thank you so much for your membership. And if you haven't become a member yet, we sure would love to have you. If you think we're doing good now, we can do a lot more good with more of you on our team. And God knows we need more of you on our team.